Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the chat show where we talk about empathy, employment, and innovation every Wednesday at 2 o'clock with all the leaders from the staffing industry and great leaders from the disability community who's really making a difference in the society. And we talk about innovation and how we can really create inclusive culture at work and promote employment for everyone. In today's show, our guest is Jill Houghton. She serves as a president and CEO of Disability In, a global nonprofit, nonpartisan business-to-business network that empowers business to achieve disability equity and inclusion. With that note, Jill, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for this incredible opportunity, Nish.
So, Jill, as you know, as a DOBE, a disabled-owned business enterprise, we truly appreciate all the great work you do at Disability In, and really influencing leaders and helping leaders understand the value of diversity and inclusion and disability inclusion. So we thank you for that. With that note, we always talk about our why, and when we talk to corporations, we talk about inclusion and inclusion which drives innovation. So, please share your thoughts. How does this the inclusion drives innovation?
Nish, one of the beauties of our world is that no two people are alike, right?
Mhm.
We are all different, and I think that that's one of the things that makes the world so great. And when we lead inclusively, and we really include all people, and I mean all people, the result is innovation. So, for example, think about things like uh, ramps, physical ramps, whether it's a curb cut or an access to a building.
Mhm.
Um, when we engaged with people, all people, including people with physical disabilities in this instance, we learned how to create a ramp, and that ramp led to an innovation that led to access, not just for people in wheelchairs, right? But for
Yeah.
people that are pulling a suitcase, or people that are pushing a stroller, or people that are using a walker. And if we fast forward and we look at things like captions, or we look at voice activated technology, when we're talking to Alexa or we're talking to Siri on our phone, that's something that obviously that inclusion led to that innovation, led to that technology, which is something that we can all use even if we're not blind. So my 10-year-old is constantly telling me, Mommy, why are you typing? Talk to your phone.
That's right. Means that is truly, that's how the really our world, not only at work, at home, is also constantly evolving through this innovation. And as you know, at Rangam, our tagline is empathy drives innovation. And what we believe, and we always talk about empathy, which is kind of creating that inclusive environment at workplace, and which ultimately it's creating really innovation at work. So I know you work with a lot of great leaders from Microsoft and Accenture. So any thoughts on how these leaders they see innovation when we talk about inclusion?
Well, I mean, like, let's use Microsoft as an example, and how they have really worked to, through empathy,
Hmm.
through listening and engaging with all people, how they have been on this accessibility journey, right?
Yeah.
And so, for example, if we look at their Super Bowl ad in 2019 that featured accessible gaming and showed, young children having the same access with accessible, gaming tools, right? Or you look at things like the Wired magazine, and when they celebrated their 25th anniversary, and they gave these 25 leaders that have impacted technology the opportunity to look forward and say what's going to be the biggest innovation, what's going to drive the future of technology in the next 25 years. And Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, said it's going to be Jenny LaFleur, and it's going to be accessibility. Jenny's deaf, as you know. She's the board chair at
Yeah.
Disability In, and she's the chief accessibility officer at Microsoft. And they're really, they're on the journey and working to drive that inclusive, innovative products and services that are inclusive of all people.
Yeah. And it's great for the business also because the way we call in our staffing world, we call this untapped talent, which is really we as a whole, as a society, we are not leveraging. So if we create the right environment, we create the right culture, um, that is going to ultimately help us build our products and services better for our customers.
Absolutely.
So thank you. Now talking about, you mentioned giving same access to people with disability and people without disability. As you know, the impact of the pandemic COVID-19, it has been impacted as per Forbes June 2020 data. One in five workers with disability has lost their employment versus one out of seven, which is people without any disability. That makes it nearly about 1 million individuals or jobs have been lost in the disability community. So, what do you think? What are the steps corporate leaders need to take to advance inclusion of people with disability at workplace?
I think that that's a big question. Um, but one of the things that these unprecedented times have created is an opportunity, I think, for us, for corporate leaders, for managers, for coworkers to really lean in and to lead with humanity, to show empathy for each other, right? It used to be that if we were on a conference call and there was a dog in the background or there was a child in the background, we might have been irritated
Yeah.
and really thrown off by that and thought, how unprofessional. How could they let their dog, interrupt the call? And I think that through these unprecedented times, it's been an opportunity for us to really talk about the importance of leading with humanity, to showing empathy, and to getting to know each other in ways that we didn't know. And I think now, we're on a call and we're in these virtual meetings, and the new normal is like, it's okay. You get to know that people have dogs and they have cats and they have kids and they have, family members, and it's a beautiful thing. And I also think it's created an opportunity for us to really stay connected with each other and to check in with each other. I think that it's really, really important that we're checking in with each other and that we're letting people know that it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
And to really, again, show empathy for each other.
And as you mentioned, in our staffing, what we call boundaryless workplace, and work and home, there is no boundary now. It's all one. At least during this time, this during the pandemic. Um, and it is really important for leaders. Please share your thoughts and your experience. How and when the leaders, when they take the lead, when it comes to disability inclusion, how it's really making a difference in corporations adopting this disability inclusion and employment programs.
I think what we see at Disability In, we see our partners really leaning in and starting conversations, talking about things like mental health, talking about anxiety. We see companies having virtual town hall meetings where the CEO is engaging with the workforce weekly on topics around uh, anxiety and depression. We see teams playing virtual game shows on Friday afternoons, right? As an opportunity to come together and to be human, or perhaps having virtual happy hours or virtual coffees, checking in, really using this time to lead inclusively and to create opportunities to talk about disability. And knowing that using the word disability is part of the human experience. It's a natural part of the human experience. We don't need to call it something else. In fact, at Disability In, we rebranded a couple of years ago, and we put the word disability in our name by choice because we think it's a strength and it's part of the human experience that we should celebrate and include. I can't hear.
Oh yeah, I can't hear either. Can you hear me, Jill?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, by mistake, I
Oh,
put myself on mute.
thank goodness it wasn't me.
Excellent.
Okay,
Sorry
good.
about that.
I didn't hear any
So,
of it.
I'm sorry.
It's
So what I
okay.
was saying that we leadership is the key to successful this type of initiatives, but we all know that grassroots level initiatives are very important, and we know ERG group who really takes the lead within these organizations, and they drive this and with full heartedly. Now, this is a very common question they ask. That where do I start? How do I start the how part? So for our audience, please share your thoughts. What are the goals and what are the methods and techniques they can use to set up the short-term and long-term goal to build that really inclusive culture and a disability hiring programs?
So, listen, the key is to get started, right? We can get so busy planning and never get started. So the key is to get started. And the reality is there isn't a recipe, right? It isn't that 1 + 1 always equals 2. So companies start in different places. We know through things like the Disability Equality Index, which is a benchmarking tool that Disability In created in partnership with the American Association of People with Disabilities. We know that there are some key characteristics that we've learned. So for example, we know that it's really important to have the support of leadership, to have a champion who will support and champion disability inclusion and connect it to the business. Ideally, that person is a person with a disability. If not, then they're an ally. But so for example, at a company like Accenture, when their general counsel came out and identified that 7 years ago he was in a car accident and lost his leg, that was really important to have the senior, one of the very most senior people in the company really identify that he has a disability, and he became the executive sponsor of their disability ERG. And you mentioned employee resource groups, and I think that, that's a key part of the equation. In the disability community, we like to talk about Ed Roberts, who was a disability rights activist in the US, and he said nothing about us without us. And I think that goes for everything disability related, or really for that matter any area of diversity, right? It's nothing about us without us. And for a company, the greatest resource that they have are their people. And where are you going to find your people? You're going to find your people in your employee resource groups. And you're going to find people with disabilities, not just in the disability ERG. You're going to find them in every ERG that you have, because 1 in 4 of us have a disability, and we cross every area of diversity. So, finding a champion and really tapping into your people are key parts of building that inclusive culture.
You're muted again. There you go.
Thank you. You are mute. Mute. These 3 words, I'm pretty sure, is very commonly and vastly used in last 6 months. So I apologize. I'm having some static when I keep my mic on, so I'm just keeping myself on mute. So thank you for sharing, Jill. This is wonderful. One of the things. So I will just quickly summarize what I heard. That getting started is the key. Then how the champion, and then people get how people get involved. Nothing without us, without us. Very important. And it's not just one ERG. All different ERG groups and all champions of any inclusion should be part of this movement within the organization. And these are the key facts. Anything else, if I have missed, you want to share how to make the program successful?
Well, I think we when we started talking today, we talked about accessibility, and accessibility is key. If we're going to really be inclusive and build that inclusive culture, it's very important that we build a culture of accessibility. And what we know is that's part of the journey. And it's a marathon, not a sprint. But the key thing is that you got to get started on building a culture of accessibility, and you need to work to build it throughout your organization. It's not just one component that sits over here in IT and isn't connected to everything else. Like Microsoft talks about building a hub and spoke model. So really embedding accessibility in all parts of the business, because it lives everywhere. It touches everything, whether it's your payroll, or it's your phones, or it's your intranet, or it's your websites, or the list is long, your procurement. The last thing that I'll say, and it's kind of an obvious, every company out there has a reasonable accommodation policy. But what we have found is that very few employees know what the policy says, know where to find the policy, and managers don't know who pays for the accommodation. So I'm being pretty general here, but I think it's really important that you unearth your reasonable accommodation policy, and that you place it in an area where, in multiple places, where your employees have access to it, and where managers know how to pay for an accommodation. Connect it to your campaign related to your ERG. Connect it to your self-ID data. Connect it, put information out there in multiple locations of how to request accommodation. And last but certainly not least is that what gets measured matters. We all know that. If things don't get measured in business, they don't count. And so it's really important to put an emphasis on measuring disability inclusion. And that involves things like your self ID, you know, and putting your data out there. It measuring your spend with your disability owned businesses, setting goals. Look, Rangam is a disability owned business enterprise. That is something that is a differentiator. You are a diverse owned business and you're a disability owned business enterprise, and that's a huge opportunity for corporations to be inclusive of businesses owned by people with disabilities in their procurement. Because
Yeah.
what? Because owning a business is a form of employment. And if we're going to impact that million people that have lost their jobs as a result of COVID, one of the ways to do that is by setting goals in your procurement and in your spend with disability owned businesses. So, there's lots of ways to go about it, but those are some key things that we've learned from the Disability Equality Index.
Love it, love it. This is excellent. You mentioned, Jill, you mentioned about setting up the goals. So, any thoughts? And this is another common question corporations they ask us. The goals, setting up the goals for 2 years versus 5 years and 10 years and 20 years. Any thoughts on that? How companies should look at these goals and then, of course, start measuring the success?
I think that it's important to engage with your ERG and to connect the disability ERG to the business. And for each company, the amount of time is going to vary on the business strategy and uh, processes that the companies have in place. What we've seen is a lot of different disability ERGs being connected to a bigger executive council and using 3-year um, uh, plans to drive their disability inclusion efforts. But again, it's a journey. And even for companies that are scoring well on the Disability Equality Index, what we know is that they're demonstrating that they're committed and they're identifying opportunities to do better, but it's a journey and everybody can do better.
Absolutely. It's a journey. It's not a destination. 2 year, 3 year, 5 year. Yes. We should have some metrics to measure the success. We should have some goals, but it is ongoing journey. And one of the other thing you mentioned that journey is not just bringing the change. It's a one-time deal. It's ongoing. And this is something I always pre-COVID, I used to say the time is now, which I have just changed my tagline to the time to act now, and it is very important. And I know you have some great vision and mission at the Disability In. That what is something corporations can do right now? Because as you know, we have lost million jobs and the recovery is going to be slow. What do they do and what can they do right now?
I'll leave companies with two requests. One is register for the Disability Equality Index. You can go to disabilityequalityindex.org and you can download the tool that lives in the public domain 365 days a year. It was created by business and disability advocates. It measures 6 different areas. It looks at leadership and culture, enterprise-wide access, employment practices, community engagement, supplier diversity, and non-US operations. And it's a tool that if you score an 80, 90, or 100, we celebrate you. If you score under an 80, nobody will ever know that you took it because it's a carrot and not a stick. And it's out there for the Fortune 1000 scope companies and the AmLaw 200. So I would encourage companies to go out there and learn more at disabilityequalityindex.org and get in the game and get started on the journey. And the last thing I would draw your attention to is that this is the 30th anniversary of the ADA this year. And while much has been achieved. There's much work ahead of us. And at Disability In, we launched a campaign called Are You In? So, are you in for building a global economy where all people can contribute? You can go to inforinclusion.org, and there's a CEO statement for your CEO to sign on. To date, 19 very large CEOs have signed on, and there are many more to come that are signing on, calling on their peers to utilize the Disability Equality Index and to commit to advancing disability inclusion. There is a joint investor statement. We have 22 investors that have $2.8 trillion in assets under management that are calling on their portfolio companies to prioritize disability inclusion and to use tools like the Disability Equality Index. And last but not least, if you are a business professional, there's an opportunity for you to join in. So again, inforinclusion.org. And we are at Disability In, we are all in, and hope that everybody will be in with us to advance disability inclusion.
I'm so sorry. We are absolutely at random. I would say we are all in. We are in with Disability In and you. Um, and we appreciate your leadership and your work you do for people with disability and really creating and influencing corporations to create this inclusive culture and inclusive workforce. So we thank you for that. Any last minute comment? I still have few minutes, couple of minutes left. Any thought and any last minute thought, please?
I just want to say thank you to you, Nish, and Rangam. Thank you for your leadership, for the opportunity to work together, and for the work that you do, not only as a disability-owned business, but in the staffing industry. I mean, you're working with a lot of very large corporations to help them on their disability inclusion journey. And we know that big business needs partners. And what an awesome opportunity for these companies to partner with a disability owned business who can turn around and help them on their disability inclusion journey by sourcing talent with disabilities. So, thank you, Nish, and thank you for your leadership at Rangam.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining. Thank you for your time. We will continue this conversation in our next session, next Wednesday, same time. Talk about empathy, innovation, and employment to create employment for everyone inclusive of people with disability, people on the autism spectrum, and disabled veterans. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day. Stay safe. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye bye.